feel like I'm always tempted to say before my sermon that by the time it's my turn, I feel like most of the work has already been done. So much amazing truth has already been said, read, prayed, sung, that I feel like there's very little that I can add. But God has even more for us today. So it's such a joy to be together again, to see all of us gathered. I feel like the snowiness makes it extra cozy inside, and the gathering extra precious and sweet and warm. And we are going to continue our study today in Mark. So if you have a Bible, please open your Bible to Mark chapter 15. It's Valentine's Day, but I don't have some cheesy Valentine's application to Jesus message. Jesus becomes your Valentine or your greatest love or something like that. It's a little more rough than that, the story that we're studying of the life of Jesus. Although, as we look at this story, I think undoubtedly we will see the glory of Christ's love for us and how that translates into our lives. But before we do that, let's read our text. So Mark 15, 1 through 15. And as soon as it was morning, the chief priests held a consultation with the elders and the scribes and the whole council. And they bound Jesus, and they led him away and delivered him over to Pilate. And Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And he answered him, "You have said so." And the chief priests accused him of many things. And Pilate again asked him, "How have you no answer to make? See how many charges they are bringing against you." But Jesus made no further answer. So Pilate was amazed. Now at the feast, he used to release for them one prisoner for whom they asked. And among the rebels in the prison who had committed murder in the insurrection, there was a man called Barabbas. And the crowd came up and began to ask Pilate to do what he usually did for them. And he answered them, saying, "Do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews?" For he perceived that it was because of envy that the chief priests had delivered him. But the chief priests had stirred up the crowd to have him release for them Barabbas instead. And Pilate again said to them, "Then what shall I do to the man that you call the king of the Jews?" And they cried out again, "Crucify him." And Pilate said to them, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Crucify him." So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released for them Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, he delivered him up to be crucified. One of the most dangerous things about sin, how it works in the human mind and the human heart, is how sin, it's not just a one-time action, right? We've emphasized this a lot in our teaching. Sin, it has a pervasive effect. It changes the way you see reality. It skews the way you interpret events, people, situations that you're in, right? Sin has a blinding effect on how we even perceive ourselves, right? People can live lives, and we have seen this around us. We've seen it in the culture, right? People can live lives of total corruption, total hypocrisy and lies. And even as they do that, they think that they're doing the right thing. They think that they will never get caught. They think that they will never be found out, right? Some of us, many of us maybe have heard some of the terrible stuff coming out about Ravi Zacharias over the last few weeks. He was, for those of you who don't know who he was a very prominent Bible teacher. He was an apologist, a person who basically explained and defended Christianity to skeptics. And this is a guy who traveled all over the world, was recognized internationally, was very respected. And specifically, one of the things that people respected Ravi about was what looked like his true and honest and pure reputation. He spoke about the accountability that we all face before God, the danger of our sin and the corrupting effect. That your public image is one thing, but your private is another thing. God sees you in private. He would speak about these things. And then after his death shortly, has been revealing more and more investigations that he has been living a life of lies his many, many years. That this man who was claiming to teach the Bible, traveling around the world, telling people about how Christianity is superior to any other faith, he has been lying the whole time to himself and to the world around. And you gotta wonder, like, how can this be possible? Like, yeah, sure, we see criminals, Barabbas in jail, corrupt, people like this who murder and steal and lie and make a life of it. And when we think of evil, when we think of sin, we think of those kind of people. But when you think of people like this who have waved the name of Jesus to the whole world as a banner, they have used that name as a cover for abuse and corruption of all kinds. It's horrifying, right? How does somebody get there? How do you get so corrupt that you are building a ministry, traveling around the world, teaching about Jesus, and having very, very immoral sexual relations with people all over the world that you're trying to keep secret? Well, when we look at our story today, as we continue the story of Jesus' trial and execution, what we want to see that Mark highlights to us the effects of sin on the world, and that there is no small sins. We oftentimes will categorize certain sins are bigger and more serious than others. Other sins are, I can let that slide. What this story hopefully shows us as we examine what is it that ended, what caused the murder of Jesus, the Son of God, the Savior of the world, the only perfect human being that ever lived. What caused him to end up murdered on a cross? How do we get there? How do we get such a terrible ending, right? What we're going to see is that sin, there's no such thing as a little sin. There's no such thing as a safe person, Christian enough. And what we want to see as we look at this story is that all of our hope only rests in Jesus and how he sees our sin and he gives himself to save us out of it. So our story breaks down to three kind of main points or main sections here, right? So the first section I called the King Examined. It's this introduction to Pilate. It's this moment when Jesus meets Pilate and has this interaction with him. Many other gospel writers, if you compare, so Mark, but you got Luke, you got John, you got Matthew, they all tell the story, and they all give even more insight than Mark does on the interaction with Pilate. This interaction, this moment with Pilate was not just a little thing that just happened. It was a big moment. It was a big event in the process of Christ's execution. As soon as it was morning, having held a meeting with the elders and scribes and all the chief priests, they tied Jesus up and they handed him over to Pilate. And he asks him a question. Now, from the start, this whole story, from the last couple of weeks that we've seen, we see that this whole trial, it's fake, right? It's a sham. These priests, they didn't have a trial. They brought Jesus, and they, under the cover of night, they kidnapped him, and then they basically were looking for any way that they can nail him to the cross. Anything that they could find that they could pit against him to kill him. This was not a process of trying to uncover the truth or look at the evidence, right? They already wanted to just support the conclusion that they already reached about who he was. The problem is, in this context, the chief priests, they had a lot of authority in their temple system, in their worship, right, in the Jewish culture, but the Jews were under Roman rule. So the chief priests had no power to execute a prison sentence or a death sentence. So having had their little trial, they have to take Jesus to Pilate because Pilate's the guy who's actually in charge of the law in the land. Pilate was what was called a prefect of Palestine. He was like the governor of the whole area. And he was a governor for a very long time. He was a governor for like 12 years. He was a very experienced politician. He knew the area very well. And he would come to Jerusalem, obviously, as we've mentioned before. During festivals, Jewish people got extra rowdy, extra nationalistic. There was a higher threat of riot. There was a higher threat of political turmoil. So, more soldiers in town. Pilate is in town, keeping an eye on things. Now, as Mark is telling this story, it's interesting because Mark's is the shortest version of these stories. Matthew tells us a little bit extra information. He talks about the fact that Pilate's wife told him, sent him a note saying, I had a dream about this Jesus, that you can't mess with him, okay? Be careful. This mysterious thing that happened to Pilate early that morning. And it was already early morning because it's daybreak. So they're coming, and this is how the governors and the political leaders would do all their political work in the morning, and then they would go have their leisurely day activities in the afternoon. Luke also adds this interrogation before Antipas was another Roman authority. So Pilate couldn't figure out what would we do with this Jesus guy. He went to another guy. John tells us a discussion about Pilate and Jesus arguing back and forth, and Pilate was just getting cynical, saying, what is truth? So this was a big event for Pilate and for Jesus himself. But Mark focuses specifically. He's brief. He focuses on the silence of Jesus, and he focuses on Pilate, his inability to get the result that he wants in this situation. When he asks his question, we realize that Pilate already has a lot of information about Jesus. He walks in and he says this, right? Are you the king of the Jews? Or in the Greek, if you just look at the word order, there's a statement in the question. He's saying, so you're the king of the Jews? Kind of like with that emphasis, walking in. And the question is obviously sort of mocking, like, oh, here you go, Mr. King, bound up in front of me, right? But it's also stating this fact. So you're the king of the Jews? Now, this interesting title, because we've never heard Jesus be called King of the Jews, right? Why King of the Jews all of a sudden? Why is this his title? Obviously, before Pilate walked in here, he had spoken to the priests who were outside. The priests, they couldn't come in because they had to stay pure for the festivities. They didn't want to get sin on them by walking into Pilate's presence because they're going to go celebrate God's holidays later today, which is so ironic, right? Because they are very far from pure, very far before this whole thing started. But the priests made this statement. They called him, this guy claims that he is the king of the Jews. If they would have just said, he is the Messiah, he says he's the Messiah, Pilate would be like, I don't care about your messiahs and your prophecies, right? But when they call him, this guy says he's the king of the Jews, all of a sudden that will get Pilate's attention. Pilate cares about peace, stability, and order in the land. So we could see here that the Jewish leaders, they were twisting their view of Jesus in order to get Pilate's attention, right? Other gospel writers say, this man forbids people to pay taxes to Caesar, as if they care about paying taxes to Caesar, as if they really care about Caesar. No, they don't. They said that he says he will destroy the temple. So all these things that they said that they even themselves didn't believe, they would want to pin to Jesus just to get Pilate to convict him. We could see from the start their corruption. They don't care about what is accurate, what is true, what is false. They just want to get him convicted. So you're the king of the Jews. And Jesus' answer is also very interesting. Jesus' answer is, you have said so. What does he mean? What kind of answer is that? You have said so. Jesus doesn't walk around proclaiming in the streets, hey guys, I'm the king, I'm the king, I'm the king, right? That would be a foolish thing to do, even though he is the king. It would be a foolish thing for Jesus to do that because king is a very politically triggered word. Jesus is not going to play by their political games. He's not going to get into that. But he also doesn't deny the truth. So Jesus' answer is kind of like a sly, sneaky response. He's not denying, but he's also pointing to what Pilate said. It's kind of like he's saying, you're the king of the Jews, and Jesus' answer is what you said. It's more of like challenging Pilate to be thinking about this statement. Who is this guy? Who is this king of the Jews? Who is this Jesus that is standing in front of him? Pilate calls him this later, right? Do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews? So he's using this title as if he himself sort of believes in it. But clearly, Pilate does not worship Jesus. Pilate does not follow Jesus. So he's on the fence. You can see Pilate, as we'll go through the story, you see Pilate, he's not convicting Jesus, but he's not totally just letting him go and defending him at all costs. He's on the fence. He is trying to figure out, as he's examining this king of the Jews, he's trying to look at him and say, who is this guy? Who is this guy? How do I respond to him? What do I do with him? And he's all the more amazed because Jesus is standing there and the accusations are piling up. Many more accusations were made, but Jesus is silent, right? So Pilate is like, aren't you going to answer? What's going on? And Mark tells us that the final result is that Pilate is amazed by Jesus. Pilate is trying to understand Jesus. He sees that Jesus is being convicted of all these things. Jesus doesn't deny this title, but then he doesn't go waving around, starting a political war. And he's silent. Many times we see in the stories that the crowds were amazed by Jesus. Jesus is an amazing figure. He's interesting. He's compelling. He's challenging. But that doesn't mean you believe in him, right? Being amazed by Jesus is not the same thing as faith in Jesus. And as Pilate is faced with this man standing in front of him who is clearly not visibly guilty of anything, but yet not really innocent either. He's amazed by him, but he doesn't go forward to truly understand and grasp and believe and follow who this Jesus, who this king really is. He's silent. Why is Jesus silent? Pilate is looking at him saying, look, all these people are making false accusations. It would be so easy for you, Jesus, to just say, no, I didn't, no, I didn't, no, I didn't, no, I didn't. I didn't say that. The Roman system did have some sort of justice. People couldn't just get convicted of something and nailed to a cross for no reason. There was some checks and balances. And Pilate's like, Jesus, you can make a defense. Why are you so quiet? Right? Was Jesus just submitting to these corrupt leaders? Earlier, if we remember the conversations that we were studying and looking at Jesus' behavior, Jesus suffered in the garden, submitting to a plan. But as Pastor Alexi pointed out last week, here we see a Jesus that is more bold and focused and calm. He is submitted. He is calm. He is not defending himself against the false accusations, even though he knows they are false. Because Jesus is submitted to a bigger purpose. Jesus is the actual king. And as a king, he has come to give himself for his people. And that is a bigger purpose that he has silently, humbly submitted himself to. This is something Pilate is baffled by. He doesn't know how to make sense of it. Isaiah 53:7 says, he was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. Like a lamb led to the slaughter, and like a sheep silent before its shears, he did not open his mouth. Jesus comes as this submitted sufferer for the sake of his people. And he faces Pilate, who tries to examine himself, examine the prisoner right in front of him. And we see Pilate gets far enough. Pilate is amazed. Pilate's trying to figure out. But his amazement doesn't translate to accepting this king. And that leads us to the second thing that we see in the story is the rejection of the king. As these accusations are piling up, Pilate isn't getting anywhere, right? So he decides a different strategy. Pilate goes out to the crowd and says, hey, this Jesus you all love, right? This king of the Jews, your king, right? Don't you guys want me to let him go? Jesus has been very popular with the crowd, right? A week before, we saw Jesus enter Jerusalem. So many thousands of people gathered to greet Jesus. They were happy. So Pilate is trying a different strategy. Pilate does not want to convict Jesus. He's not quite that bad. So Pilate is going to try to use this crowd to leverage the crowd against the Pharisees, right? He's a politician. Don't you want me to release to you the king of the Jews? Was Pilate a crowd pleaser? It's an important note to make here. Was Pilate just trying to please the crowd? No. When we look at the story of Pilate, he's a very interesting guy. As I said, he was a governor for a long time, 12 years. He did not like the Jews. A lot of Christians oftentimes have been tempted to kind of glamorize Pilate here. Pilate did not like the Jews. He did things in the past that made the Jews very angry. But he was also a practical guy. He had a job to do. He had peace to order in the land. He wanted to keep his job. He wanted to have a stable government. And so even though he has his own agendas, he is also submitting to kind of a deeper purpose, a deeper goal that he himself wants to accomplish as a governor over this area. He is not interested in pleasing the crowd, but he is not also interested in creating riots and rebellions in his land, right? So he tries to use this crowd against him. Now, when he comes out here and he asks this crowd on his balcony on this early morning, this crowd is already there, and he's got this tradition, right, to let go of a prisoner on a holiday. As he's doing that, we realize in this whole story that there are really three big main characters that Mark is trying to highlight, that we've already been talking about. And these three characters, they are all three equally involved and equally responsible for the death of Jesus. They are all three parties that all had an equal weight role in the murder of our king. Let's see how that plays out here. First of all, he meets this crowd, right? Let's see here. The crowd. There was supposed to be one more slide, but we'll get there. When he comes to this crowd, he comes to them with a question, right? These people were amazed by his miracles, and he's giving them this king. He's saying, okay, guys, you guys love this Jesus. He has done so many miracles. He's done so many things. And the ironic thing is that he is offering to them, he is using the title Jesus is king. He doesn't really believe Jesus is the king. He is offering Jesus as the king to the people who are Jewish people. They don't really believe Jesus is the king. All in the middle of all this, in this whole story, Jesus is being called the king. And everybody involved misses the fact that he is the true king. As Pilate comes out, he is offering Christ. We see the crowd respond. And the crowd's response is shocking to Pilate, right? Part of being part of a crowd, part of the effect of crowds. You know, in the news, one of the big things this year has been crowds, mobs, right? The effect of the crowd on a person. When you're part of the crowd, you are going with the flow. You're easily manipulated by your circumstances. The emotions of the situations that you're in, they move you, and they lead you to change your role, change your position, accomplish things, right, that you never would have maybe on your own. Part of our human nature is to not stick out, to not be a person who is not fitting into the world around us. We don't want to stick out. We don't want to be outsiders. We want to belong. We don't want to be called like as being weird. We want to show up and fit in and go along with everything else, right? Pilate comes out to this crowd, and one of the reasons that we're shocked when we read the story, how is the crowd in Jerusalem of Jewish people who has been perhaps welcoming Jesus a few days before is now yelling to crucify him? When we see the massive change, the massive shift of this crowd, we see here an angle, a window into the human heart. An angle into how we behave as human beings. Pilate, as a pagan, he doesn't even believe what these Jews believe. He's looking at this and he is shocked. He is saying, why would you ask for me to give you guys a criminal, Barabbas, who is a murderer? Why are you guys asking me to release a murderer when there is an innocent man who has been walking around the land teaching and doing good? How can you have shifted your perspective on Jesus so quickly? And the only response he gets is, crucify him. Why? What wrong has he done? Crucify him. It's a very ironic situation because a pagan, a non-believer, is asking a crowd of Jewish believers in God about the injustice that they are moving forward. He is trying to show them, people, Why? And their response is just crucify him. When Victor read the passage earlier, it's amazing to see the story of God's people, right? When we look at the story of Israel, it's not just the story of Israel. It's a story of humanity, right? If Israel, people who are God's people of the Bible, people who pray, people who sing God's songs and worship his festivals, if they can get so corrupt, anybody can, right? This entire crowd of Jewish people who grew up memorizing the law of God, they are facing in front of them a massive injustice, a murder, the death of an innocent man, and they look straight through it and they condemn him. It's interesting when you look at social experiments about how we react when we stick out. It's amazing. When they run these experiments, every time they get the same result, right? Person comes in to a room, they show him a straight line, they show him a crooked line. He says, that's a straight line, that's a crooked line. And then another person comes in and he's sitting next to them and he says, that's a straight line, that's a straight line. And the first response is usually like laugh, like, oh, this is a joke, right? Like, what? What did you? No, they're straight, crooked, not straight, straight. Second person comes in, says straight, straight. This person's starting to get a little uncomfortable. Third person, fourth person, fifth person. Then they come back to the first guy. He goes, I guess they are straight. It is the human nature that is inside of us that is afraid to go against even what we see in front of us to be wrong. Why are you here today? Why am I here today? What type of follower of Jesus am I? Am I just here for the crowd? Am I just here because I was raised in the church, because I do this every Sunday? Do I sing the songs and pray the prayers because that's what I do, because everybody around me does that? And then when church ends and I go out to a different life and I'm surrounded by a different group of people, do I walk in a completely different direction? What drives me? Is my drive today what is the deeper drive? Is my deeper drive a desire to fit in, to be accepted and loved by the people and the social surroundings? Or is my deeper desire to fit in to the program of Jesus, the King, even though that fitting in will cause me to stick out and cost me things in my life? Do we love the crowd, or do we love the King who loves the crowd and gives himself for them? You know, the opposite, by the way, the opposite of a person who is trying to fit in and follow along is not rebels. Right? The rebel is just trying to fit in with his own agenda when he hates other people. The opposite effect of trying to fit into a crowd is loving the crowd. That's what Jesus does. As we're going to read forward, he sees all this corruption. It's all right in front of him, right? And Jesus, what does Jesus do? He prays for them. Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. As we look at this crowd, we move past them. We see then the force behind the crowd, and that is the chief priests, the high priests. They are smarter than Pilate, or maybe smarter than Pilate thinks. Pilate doesn't want to condemn Jesus. He thinks Jesus is innocent. So Pilate goes to use the crowd against the high priest. But by the time he's out there, the chief priests are already among the crowd. The chief priests have already figured out their political tactics, and they are already, it says, they stirred up the crowd. So there's an intentionality here. The chief priests, in their corruption, it's so explicit here in the story, right? They are stirring up the crowd to crucify Jesus. They've already tried to use false witnesses. Now they're using sketchy methods to get among the crowd and just to get people riled up against Jesus. It's a game of political chess, and the high priests are winning. Pilate is stuck in between. And it says, this is a remarkable statement that Mark gives us. Pilate is standing on this balcony, he's looking at this crowd, and it says, Pilate knew, he understood that it is because of jealousy that the high priests handed him over. That's the real killer. It was because of jealousy. It's not about truth. It's not about protecting the temple. It's not about leading God's people away from error, protecting God's holy land, right? Their long-awaited king has arrived. Hundreds of years, Israel waited for the king. The king has arrived, right? And these high priests, and he arrives. Notice, Jesus was a simple guy, walking around, no education, just teaching and doing good, right? He's a simple person. He has no money. He has no wealth. He has no political influence. Jesus arrives as a simple person who is teaching and healing, and they are jealous of him. They are jealous. Jealousy is one of those sins, right? That can hide in the heart that, it's not that terrible. Jealousy it's not like, adultery or stealing or murder. Goodness, right? Jealousy is when we feel frustration and anger or unhappiness or unsettlement or discomfort when we see the success or blessing of another person, right? Jealousy, it kind of glows like a little ember, not a raging fire. It glows in the heart like this little heat that says, man, why does that person get all the glory? I have the same talents. It's these thoughts that linger in the back of the mind, right? Jealousy is not the same thing as like full-out rebellion. Okay, I'm going to take them down. I'm going to take over the world. I'm going to kill people, right? Jealousy is this silent little killer that kind of grows in the shadows. Why does that person get recognized? Why does that person get to do that ministry and nobody asks me? Why did that person get invited and not me? Right? The amazing thing is that here we are reading of the worst crime in human history. Right? This is the worst crime ever committed by human hands. The murder of the Son of God. The murder of the only perfect person that ever lived. And the seed of that crime was jealousy. This murder was planned and executed and driven to completion by who? By no good rebels who run around the countryside robbing people? No. Jesus was convicted and murdered by men who taught the Bible. By men who told God's people how to follow God. The worst crime of human history was done by people who were the olden day version of pastors. Not the people you meet downtown at midnight in the alley. Excuse me. That was the nap alarm from yesterday. So, the worst thing that ever happened, and it happened because jealousy took root in the heart of people who taught God's word, who said this is how you follow God, right? When we look at God, before we go to application, you look at the story of Ravi Zacharias. You look at the story of so many scandals in our day of Christian leaders who are falling in terribly corrupt, immoral ways, right? Where do you think that starts? Nobody starts a ministry saying, I'm going to travel the world and I'm going to create, prostitution schemes all over the world under my ministry of Jesus. Nobody starts their life like that. Nobody starts their life as an abuser. Nobody starts their life as a murderer. These Pharisees, they didn't start. First day they saw Jesus get baptized. Oh, time to kill him. It didn't start that way. It started with this glowing resentment in the heart that looked at the success of the other and said, I need that. I deserve that. That should be mine. So when we look at our hearts, jealousy is not a little sin, right? Is there jealousy lingering in our hearts? Oftentimes, it comes up in the most dignified places, right? Ministry is a big one. Why don't I get to do that? Why don't people ask me to participate? Why don't I get the glory? Why don't people recognize my gifts? Right? We subtly start to think that we deserve more than we do have. That we are being overlooked. that no one sees how passionate we are for God. It's always about God's glory, and I'm very passionate, but they don't see me, right? The little fire, the little ember ignites a terrible fire. So that's the high priests. And then we have Pilate. As I said, when we look at Pilate, this interesting man, he himself is kind of a confusing figure because he seems like he's trying to do the right thing, but then he doesn't, right? He seems like he's the guy who sees through. He's like, you hypocrites, right? He sees that. He sees the hypocrisy. He sees the corruption, right? In the past, actually, there's been a lot of, in the early church, there's been a lot of kind of writing about Pilate, how great he was and how he was actually a Christian. He was actually like hiding and secretly a Christian, and then I don't know what exactly happened to him afterwards. But we can't sugarcoat Pilate here in this story, right? Yes, Pilate sees the corruption. Yes, Pilate thinks Jesus is innocent. Yes, Pilate is trying to get Jesus to go free. Yes. Pilate wanted to do the right thing. Let's get that clear. Pilate wanted to do the right thing. But as this crowd is shouting, as things are getting super rowdy, as the other gospel writers say that Pilate was worried that a riot was starting. We've heard all about riots in the past 6 months. Riots can get deadly. Riots would be very not good for his political portfolio. As he sees the situation growing in the direction that he didn't want it to go, he bends 100% in the other direction to everything that they demand and goes with their plan, right? Wanting to satisfy the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas to them. And having flogged Jesus, he handed him over to be crucified. No, Pilate wasn't a crowd pleaser. Pilate disliked the Jews. He thought they were annoying, ridiculous. He didn't like them. Pilate was driven by something deeper than trying to please the crowd. Pilate's motivation was his own convenience and his own comfort. What's in it for me? How much is it going to cost me? I want to do the right thing. I want to do the right thing here, but you guys are making it really difficult. I'm gonna have to step away. He doesn't want to riot. He doesn't want trouble. He doesn't want have to answer to the superior Caesars or whatever. He doesn't want any big bumps. He wants a smooth career. He wants to be able to wrap this up and go have Eggs Benedict and go shoot some golf balls. He's got a plan for the day. And this is getting in the way. He meant well, but at the end of the day, it's too much cost to his own comfort, his own plan, his own personal agenda. There's a Russian phrase that came to me and I'm trying to translate it into English. This is very rare, right? When I have a Russian phrase that I don't know how to translate into English, where we say, "Нельзя с вами по-хорошему," or is that even the right way to say it? "Нельзя с вами по-хорошему." It's like, it's impossible to be right and good with you guys. It's like, the idea in this phrase is, I tried to do the right thing, but you're just too much, so I'm going to have to do the thing that I know is not the right thing. These Jews are getting crazy. I'm just going to wash my hands. John says Pilate did this symbolic washing, saying, you guys do your own thing. I'm washing my hands. This ain't my business anymore. You don't get to do that, right? You can't just say, not my business, right? You can't just say, I'm not part of this. We are part of this. We are part of every situation that we're in. And no matter how difficult or tense or complicated the situations that we are put in, we don't get to make excuses and say, well, I tried to do the right thing. It was just hard, It's the probably one of the most common frustrations of dads, at least. Probably moms too, right? I tried to do the right thing. I tried to teach them about Jesus, but today they're just crazy. We live in a culture today, one of the drug of our age is personal comfort. We probably don't realize it because it's so in the air of everything we do, right? Everything in our culture is revolving around our individual comfort and our convenience. And it seeps into our bones in ways that we don't even realize. If we were transported into a different time period, we would probably quickly see how radically individualistic we are. Right? What do we complain about? That's a test. We complain about cloudy days and slow Wi-Fi and cold pizza and overcreamed coffee and not enough closet space, noisy children, right? Those things can be hard sometimes. But when we look at the things we complain about, the things that we expect from our daily lives, we realize, right? Or we draw careful lines. Yes, we want to serve the church. Yes, we want to love people. But we draw careful lines to preserve our health and not to serve too much, not to give too much, not to host too much, not to get too busy with ministry. We don't want to get burned out, not to host too many dinners or go to too many needy people or spend too much money on other people's problems, right? Because we need to stay healthy. We need to keep our families good. Obviously, I'm not saying that we need to go burn ourselves out and spend all of our money and not see our kids and families and just give ourselves away, right? But when we look at our tendencies, what drives us? Jonathan Edwards wrote sermons on the backs of receipts. You know, it's one of those interesting things they find in history. He didn't have enough paper to write a sermon. He had to write a whole sermon on the back of a receipt, right? Have you ever heard about George Muller? Very interesting old man. Well, he was old at some point, but, very interesting man that lived in England. He barely had enough food to put on his own table. This man lived in London. Barely enough food to fit on his own table to feed his wife, and he was welcoming dozens of children from the streets to feed them. And he's just praying, Lord, send food. We don't have any food, but we got to love these kids. When you heard of, some of you may have heard the name David Brainard. He was a missionary in Illinois in the 1700s, New Jersey, to the Native American tribes. This man, in his 20s, traveled hundreds of miles through cold wilderness on horseback alone, battling tuberculosis and coughing blood, living in a shack in the woods, to preach the gospel to Native American people who didn't hear about Jesus. The point is not like to guilt ourselves. When we look at history, we're like, oh my gosh, those people did that, look at us complaining about our coffee. The point is not to guilt ourselves, but the point is to ask ourselves, when we look at Pilate and his desire to do the right thing, oh yeah, I want to do ministry as long as it doesn't cost me too much, my time, my schedule, my hobbies. When we look at Pilate, when we look at ourselves, we got to ask ourselves, how much more fruitful can I be if I was battling the sin of selfishness and comfort and convenience? One of the terrible things you read when you're reading all this horrible stuff about Ravi Zacharias, and one of the things that these women that he had sexual relations with, constantly different women from different parts of the world saying the same thing. He would say, I deserve this. Nobody knows the burden that I bear. I deserve this. I'm doing hard things. Personal comfort was the sin that led to the murder of God's Son. Personal comfort. That's the drug of our time. We're blessed, we're comfortable, right? The tragedy is that many people are going to reach heaven, right? Jesus said this. Many people are going to come to him. These people, they saw Jesus, and they missed it because of these little sins. Many people will come to Jesus and say, Lord, Lord, we did all these things for you, right? Jesus is going to say, I never knew you. You didn't have the real Jesus. You had a cheap cutout. You had an easy Jesus. You had a Jesus who made your life better, strengthened, more effective, whatever it is, right? But that Jesus did not transform you. That Jesus didn't challenge you. That Jesus didn't expose your heart, your sins, your pride, all the dark things that you want to try to hide. Many people today, they want Jesus to make them kind of new, right? We don't want to be made totally new. We want to preserve all of the other things. We want it kind of new. We want Jesus to help me with my anxiety, my depression, my money problems, my family relationships. But please, Jesus, don't touch everything else, right? Personal convenience. That's not the real king. Pilate missed it. Pilate okayed the murder of Jesus for personal convenience. so he could play golf later that day. Or what? I mean, it's not golf, but whatever they did, right? How much more fruitful would our lives be if we challenged our hearts, challenged our guiding principles more clearly? Whoops, sorry. Oh, I forgot the third point on there. The third point is the king substituted, right? The king substituted. We can't overlook. We kind of got to the end of the story, but it's not fully the end. There was this other guy. There was this other guy in the story whose name we read who wasn't innocent, right? Barabbas. He was a criminal. The guy's messed up, tattooed up, killed a bunch of people, stole a bunch of stuff. He's crossed off, right? He wakes up this morning on this crazy day, not to say bad things about tattoos. That wasn't the point, but you know what I'm saying. Ugh. He wakes up this morning, this man who has done bad things and not afraid to say it. He wakes up this morning and he expects to be killed. Like, think about what it's like to wake up that day. I remember Pastor Vitale preached about this a while ago. It just rocked me how I never saw Barabbas this way. Barabbas wakes up. He is expecting to be killed that day. He wakes up and says, oh, my last day here. And then what does he hear? This crowd faintly hears. He hears the sound of hundreds of people yelling his name. Barabbas, Barabbas, right? The story is not just a story about three little sins that murdered the Savior. The story is not just about sinfulness. It's not just about our crowd-pleasing tendencies or our jealousy or our convenience, our laziness, right? This story is as much a picture of actually the fullness of the gospel, of how salvation happens to us. Jesus is the king. He's called the king in this story 3 times. Ironically, everybody who calls him king doesn't actually see that he is the king. Jesus is the king who stands before these people and they demand his death, right? But his death causes this lying, thieving, murderous man to unexpectedly be, the door's opened, chains are unlocked, you're free, Barabbas, go. Someone else is dying for you today. When we look at the story, we see the dangerous power of sin. We cannot conclude and say, okay, I need to be less worried about the crowd. I need to be less selfish. I need to serve more. I need to be less jealous. I need to be more humble, right? That's not what the point of the story is. The point of the story is to show this really interesting, clear line between Barabbas, who is a murderer, labeled murderer, capital M murderer, and everybody outside, the Christians, the believers, the priests, the Bible teachers outside who are jealous and selfish. They are also just as much as murderers as the guy in the cell. There is no innocent parties in the story. Everybody is guilty of the same thing. Everybody is at the same level before God. There are no differences between the clean and the unclean. That's why when I say this Barabbas guy who is convicted as, oh, that's the bad guy. When we think of bad guys, we think of him. We think of people with evil laughs and evil villain lairs. And what Mark is showing us is the evil villain sitting in the cage is the same as the evil villains running around with Bibles, saying, this is what God says. Everyone in the story is a murderer. And Jesus is silent. He sees all of these murderers. And he says, this is what I came for. This is what I came for. The interesting thing, the amazing thing about Barabbas too, Barabbas' name means son of Abba, son of the Father. So Jesus looks and he understands he has come. The perfect son of God is given and killed so that the murderous, lying, thieving son of the Father can go free. Jesus understands that he came into this world for broken sons and daughters, for lying, confused, thieving, believing in their own sins to the point where they can't even see themselves. You know, we get so defensive about our sins. If somebody asks you about something and you get really angry, that's a sign. That's a light bulb. I'm defending that, right? Jesus is looking at all these sinners who are so interwoven with their own sin that they don't even see what's going on. And he says, for these people I have come. I'm silent. I have no objections to make. I am here for this. Our sin goes so much deeper than we think, right? All of your littlest sins are capable of making you the greatest evil villain of all time, right? Those Jewish folks who woke up that morning and walked up to Pilate's window, they did not conceive of the fact that they would be partakers in the greatest murder of all time. They were just ordinary Jewish folks. They're going to go to the temple afterwards and sing God's songs. Right? Our sin, there's no little sin. All of our sin goes deep all the way down. So following Christ, following Jesus, knowing this Savior and not rejecting him, right? It starts with realizing that he must be my substitute. That's what we call the substitutionary atonement. Means that it's substituted. Your guilt, your dirt, the blood that is on your hands is applied to Jesus. Jesus' perfection, his righteousness is applied to you. God clears you of guilt. Yes, you are still a sinner. You still struggle with sins. But now you are cleared of guilt, which means he welcomes you as his son and daughter. He welcomes you as his own. He wraps his arms around you. He fills your heart with his strength to fight the sin that is left. He makes you his child. All of that is possible because the king was substituted for us. We were given the opportunity to go free. And this freedom, it starts with this. It starts with looking at our hearts, looking at our sins, looking at Jesus, looking at the corruption of the world, looking at Ravi Zacharias and realizing that this terrible corruption, it exists in all of us, and we can't fix ourselves. Right? So getting saved, how do you become a Christian today? That's where it starts. It starts with admitting our guilt and seeing, I can't fix my heart. I need the substitute. I need Jesus to be my king. I am ready to go against the crowd. I am ready to give everything up, whatever. I just need him. Because when I'm going with the crowd, when I'm going with my jealousy, when I'm going with my anger, when I'm going with my convenience, my selfishness, I end up right where all these people end up. Right? I lead myself into death. The passage that Victor read for us earlier. You know, the God of the Bible, when he talks about sin, it's not because he's angry. It's because he loves you. That's the amazing thing. You know, people criticize, oh, the Old Testament's so violent. Look at God. He's so vengeful. He's like, I'm going to punish you sinners. That's not what the text says. The text says, I'm going to destroy you for your sin, but please come to me. Though your sins are as scarlet, they will be white as snow. The whole point of God telling you that you're a sinner today is so that he can cleanse you, so that he can apply his blood, his life, his strength to you and make you new, right? That's what he came for. That's why he was silent. That's why he accepted everything that he saw right before him. A couple questions for us as we're getting out of here. What are the little sins that hide in your heart today? Do we understand that there are no little sins? Do we understand that there's nothing that we can just, this is a little thing, whatever. I'm working on it. No. Bring it to the light. Bring it to the light or it will destroy you. It'll destroy lives, relationships. It'll destroy people around you. There are no little sins. Do we understand that our corruptions runs infinitely deeper than we even imagine? Do we view our heart as the greatest danger in my life? What is the greatest danger of your life? It's me. It's my heart. It's a critical question for us to ask in our church life. We got a new building. We're getting new stuff. We're moving in. We're growing. Yay. The greatest danger is not the liberals. It's not the liberal agendas or governments or anti-God or atheists or whatever. The greatest danger to our church community is the sin that's already inside of our hearts. Do we believe that? Do we understand that? And do we run to our Savior every day, welcoming his strength and his grace that he gladly gives, right? Do we rejoice every day? Do we rejoice at the gift of Jesus' righteousness to you? Think about it. We can spend a whole month thinking about this. I am a murderer. I'm a sinner. I have rebelled against God. And yet I am made white as snow. I get to walk into God's kingdom as a child. What? Why? Because he loves you. Because that's what he came to do. Because he gave his life to set you free, to bring you home. Do we receive and rejoice this crazy thought that I am forgiven? Even though I'm battling my anger, my selfishness every day, he's like, you're my son. I love you. That is not imputed to you in a guilty way that makes you cast out from my presence. Jesus was convicted for us. We will never be convicted if we follow Jesus. And finally, do we come to him every day, understanding that just as I need external righteousness, I need external strength. He is your substitute, not just once. He is your substitute every day. Every day, he is giving himself over to you. He is giving his strength, his grace, his wisdom, his conviction. He is giving you himself every day to strengthen and guide your life. And am I pursuing this king? Am I confessing him? Am I loving him? Am I welcoming him? Amen. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you at the amazing and confusing nature of your mercy to us. We thank you, Lord, that you are the king over all the galaxies. You are the creator of the world. And you stood there at that moment. You saw the corruption of every single person. And you stayed. You did not raise a voice to defend yourself. You did not fight back. You did not demand your rights, Lord, because your rights were perfect. You gave yourself over to us, Lord, as a lamb is given in a sacrifice, Lord. We thank you for the amazing gift of righteousness, of forgiveness, Lord. Be our substitute today. Help us to rejoice in the amazing beauty of your righteousness. As we're driving home, as we see the snow, Lord, it's a picture. Whiter than snow is what you make us. Lord, I pray for everybody here. Some of us are still battling with our sin, Lord, hiding it, protecting it. Lord, I pray that you would be convicting with the convicting power of your love to draw us in the love of Christ, Lord. Help us to remove the barriers. Help us to know that you are the one and only King, the one and only one who we can follow. Help us to forsake our personal desires, our pride, our jealousy. Help us to not worry about what are people going to think. Lord, help us to understand that all we need is you. All we need is Christ who has been crucified for us, Lord. Be our light. Be our guide, Lord. We are not what we should be, Lord. And yet you are everything that you are and more. Lord, help us to delight in this. Help us to be Christians who live in this corrupt world. Help us to be known for our joy, our freedom, our generosity, because you have filled our hearts.